I never imagined I would betray the trust of the one I loved most. My marriage, with all its imperfections, was always a reflection of something deep and true. In the good and bad times, in the moments of joy and in the struggles, I thought we were immune to any storm. But, like a crack that opens without warning, the lie took shape into something I could never control. It was an impulsive decision, almost senseless. I went to a party with a friend, without telling my husband. At first, it seemed like just a simple night of fun. I didn't want to think about the daily pressures, the responsibilities weighing down on me. I just wanted to feel young again, to experience something that would make me feel alive. But I didn't know that night would be the starting point for a series of choices that would destroy everything I had built with him. When I came back home, with my heart racing, I found a silent house. His look said it all. He knew. There were no words. It wasn't necessary. He looked at me as if he were seeing a stranger, someone he no longer recognized. There was no fight, no accusations in that moment. The pain was in his eyes, and the guilt, deep within mine. Everything felt frozen in the air. I knew that what I had done couldn't be forgiven, but the doubt about what he would do next consumed me. And I didn't know how much that lie would cost me. If you want to know what happened next, how everything crumbled in a way I never imagined, stay with me until the end. I'll tell you everything. If you feel like you've been through something similar, or if you simply want to understand how pride and revenge can take us to places we never thought we'd go, then leave a like, subscribe, and come live this story with me. It won't be easy, but you'll understand how choices can change our lives forever. I woke up that day with the feeling that everything was about to change, although I didn't know how or why. It wasn't a premonition of something good or bad, but a strange feeling, as if the universe was watching me from a distance. My body was tired, and my mind, still stuck on the night before, couldn't shake the growing guilt that consumed me. I knew something was about to happen, but I couldn't imagine what it would be. I walked into the house, trying to stay calm, but the silence surrounded me in an odd way. The air was thick, as if something was about to burst. The floor was empty, without any noise. There was no laughter, no sign of life, and that made my throat tighten. He was there, in the living room, with his phone in hand. He didn't look at me when I entered, but there was something in that gesture that seemed to stare at me intensely. His gaze wasn't one of anger or sadness. It was something deeper, more painful, a mix of disappointment and loss. And it was in that moment that I knew, with complete certainty, that he knew. I stood there, frozen at the door, my heart racing. I couldn't move a muscle. He slowly lifted his eyes, as if he had been waiting for me for hours, not knowing how to react, not knowing what to do with the pain that had settled between us. He didn't say a word. Nothing. I stood there, paralyzed, my mind racing, trying to come up with an explanation, any justification for what I had done. But how could I justify such a cruel lie? How could I say that I went to a party with my friend, hiding it from him, without feeling like my soul was being torn apart from the inside? I knew what he wanted, or rather, what he didn't want to hear. He didn't want me to try to explain myself, or, worse, apologize. The silence between us was the answer. There was no longer room for words, because what he felt couldn't be fixed with empty phrases. What I did was destroy his trust, something that could never be repaired. And then, he finally broke the silence, but it wasn't with harsh words, as I had imagined.
No.
He looked at me with a frightening calmness and, with the most serene voice I had ever thought I'd hear, said, "Don't you think you've done enough for today?" I tried to speak, but I couldn't. The words were stuck in my throat, suffocated by shame. I could only look at him, hoping for some reaction, something that would tell me he still loved me, that there was still something to save. But there was nothing left. What I had done had cut the invisible bond between us. I looked at him and saw a man who was distancing himself from me, who was leaving even though he hadn't moved. How is it possible that I caused this? How is it possible that, in one night, I destroyed everything I thought was solid between us? And it's in this moment that I ask, what would you do if you were in my place? What would you do if you were on the other side, being betrayed, not knowing how to move forward, with your heart shattered? Because I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can forgive myself, or if I should just wait for him to forgive me. I just don't know. That's why I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments what you would do if you were me. Don't leave me alone in this despair. Maybe, together, we can understand what happened here. Then, he got up, and the expression on his face was more serious than I had ever seen. I don't know if I can live with this, but I'll think about what to do next. Those words cut through me deeply. He was leaving me. He was no longer here, by my side, like before. He was pulling away from me, and I knew that this distance would never be bridged. I wanted to run after him, beg, but I knew it wouldn't help. I knew that words no longer had power. What I had done was much more than a simple lie. It was a betrayal of his trust, and that was something that might never come back. No matter how much I wanted to restore what we lost, I knew the damage was done. There was no way to undo what had been done. The silence that hung between us in that moment was heavier than any words we could have said. I felt small, insignificant, as if all my flaws had become visible all at once. What I didn't know was that what was coming next would be even more painful. The weight of guilt was now a constant crushing me with every passing second, and I didn't know if I could bear it. But I knew that, somehow, everything I had built was slowly falling apart. The days after that moment were a blur. The house felt emptier, quieter, almost as if the walls themselves were grieving. He spoke less, moved more slowly, as if the weight of his own thoughts had become unbearable. I could see the conflict in his eyes every time he looked at me, as if he was torn between love and a need for vengeance. I tried to approach him, to talk, to apologize, but every time I opened my mouth, the words felt hollow. I didn't know what to say anymore. I didn't know how to fix the mess I had made. I could see he was slipping further away from me, and the more I tried to hold on, the more I felt him slipping through my fingers. And then came the conversation he had with his friend, a moment that would seal our fate. I didn't know about it at first. He was quiet one night, sitting in the living room, phone in hand, staring at the screen, lost in thought. I didn't ask what he was doing or who he was talking to. I knew better than to intrude. But later, when he finally spoke, his words made everything clearer. He had talked to his best friend, the one man he trusted, the one he turned to when things got too hard. And the advice that friend gave him was not the advice I had hoped for. You need to make her feel the same pain you're feeling, he said. If she can betray you like this, why should you be any different? Make her see what it feels like. My stomach turned when I heard those words. My heart sank, knowing that he was now considering taking revenge. But what struck me the hardest was the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of it. For the first time in days, there was something there, something that resembled resolve, something that seemed to be pushing him forward. The anger in his voice was unmistakable. He had been holding it all in, trying to keep his composure, but now, the floodgates were open. He was angry, angry at me, angry at the betrayal, angry at the fact that he had loved me so much and I had thrown it all away. And maybe, just maybe, he thought that revenge would somehow make him feel better, give him some sense of control over what had happened. I don't know if he realized it then, but the moment he started thinking about vengeance, it wasn't just me he was hurting. He was also destroying himself. I wanted to stop him, to beg him not to go down that path. But I knew it wasn't my place anymore. I had lost that right the moment I lied to him. I could feel the tension building in the air, suffocating me. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but instead, I sat in silence, waiting for him to make the next move. I could see it in his eyes. He was already planning what to do next. And deep down, I knew it would break us both. He was no longer the man I married. I didn't know who he had become, but the rage in his heart was beginning to take over, and I couldn't stop it. Neither of us could stop what was coming. The moment I made my choice, I set something in motion, and now we were both trapped in a spiral of pain that would take us to places we never imagined. As the days passed, the atmosphere between us grew thicker, more suffocating. I could feel it in every interaction, every glance, every moment we shared. It was as though we were two strangers living in the same house. The love that once filled the spaces between us had faded, replaced by something darker, something that neither of us could name. He started coming home later, spending more time away, finding excuses to leave. At first, I thought it was because he needed space, he needed time to process what had happened. But as the hours turned into days, I realized it was more than that. He wasn't just physically absent, he was emotionally gone, and that realization hit me harder than anything else. The man I had once known, the man I had loved, was slipping away from me, and I was helpless to stop it. I tried everything I could think of to reconnect, to bridge the gap that had formed between us, but every attempt seemed to push him further away. The more I reached out, the more he pulled back. He wouldn't let me touch him, wouldn't let me in. And it was during this time that I began to notice the small, subtle changes in him, the shifts that made me realize I no longer knew who he was. The kindness that had always been his trademark was gone, replaced by a coldness that cut through me like ice. He no longer looked at me with the warmth I had once taken for granted. Now, when he looked at me, it was with a detached, almost indifferent expression. I had lost him, and there was nothing I could do to get him back. But the worst part wasn't just the growing distance, it was the feeling that he was slipping into a version of himself I didn't recognize, and it scared me. He had started doing things that were so unlike him. His moods were unpredictable, shifting from moments of intense anger to periods of deep silence. It was like I was living with a stranger who wore my husband's face, but had no soul behind his eyes. I didn't know who he was anymore. And worse, I didn't know who I was becoming in this relationship. I was no longer the woman he had married. I had betrayed him, yes, but in the process, I had lost myself as well. I had become someone who was afraid of her own reflection, someone who didn't know how to fight for what was left between us. And in the midst of all this, I realized something terrible. I wasn't the only one who had changed. He had changed too, and not in a way that could be undone. The man who once loved me unconditionally, who had stood by my side through thick and thin, had started to become someone else. Someone I feared. I began to wonder, what if this was it? What if the man I married was truly gone? What if there was no coming back from this? The thought terrified me more than anything. I had imagined that, somehow, we would work through this, that love would conquer all, that time would heal the wounds I had caused. But as the days went by, I began to lose hope. The more he withdrew, the more I felt like I was suffocating in this house that no longer felt like home. And as much as I wanted to fix things, as much as I wanted to undo the hurt I had caused, I knew that I couldn't do it alone. I couldn't fix something that was already broken beyond repair. I had shattered his trust, and with that, I had shattered us. There was no going back, no reversing the damage I had done. And as I sat there in the silence, with the weight of my own guilt crushing me, I began to realize that I was not the only one who had been hurt in this situation. He was hurting too. I could see it in his eyes, the pain that had replaced the love, the anger that had taken the place of the tenderness. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew it was true. He was becoming a man I didn't recognize, and the person I was becoming was someone I didn't want to be. We were both lost, and neither of us knew how to find our way back. The gap between us grew wider with every passing day, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was no bridge wide enough to cross it. In his eyes, I could see the distance, the same distance I was beginning to feel in my own heart. We were strangers, living under the same roof, pretending to be something we weren't. And the worst part was that neither of us had the courage to admit it. We were both too proud, too hurt, and too scared of what would happen if we faced the truth. But the truth was undeniable. Our relationship was falling apart, and there was no way to fix it. He had already started to change, and I had already started to change. What we had was slipping away, and no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't hold on to it. The distance between us was growing, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I could feel the tears threatening to spill from my eyes as I sat there, alone, in the silence of our home. But I couldn't cry. Not yet. I still couldn't accept that this was how it was going to end. It wasn't until that weekend that I fully understood the depths of what was happening between us. I had been living in this fog of guilt and confusion, hoping that somehow things would improve, that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. But reality had a way of crashing down on me with a force I wasn't prepared for. It was a Saturday, and I had just finished cleaning the house when I noticed that he wasn't around. At first, I didn't think much of it. He had been spending more time away lately, trying to figure out what he wanted, or perhaps, as I now believed, what he could do to make himself feel better after everything I had done. But this time felt different. He hadn't said anything about where he was going. There were no texts, no phone calls. It wasn't like him. I tried to push it aside, but the feeling in my stomach wouldn't let me. My mind raced, turning over every little detail, every subtle shift in his behavior. And that's when I made the decision to look through his things. I hated myself for even thinking about it, but I knew deep down that I needed to know. I had to know what was really going on. The man I had loved was slipping further and further away from me, and all I could do was watch it happen. I found his phone hidden in the drawer, and as I opened it, my hands trembled. I never thought I would be doing this, never thought I would stoop to this level. But there I was, sifting through his messages, hoping to find something, anything, that would make sense of the distance, the coldness that had taken over him. And that's when I found it. I couldn't believe my eyes. There it was, a message from a woman, someone I didn't recognize. My heart stopped as I read her words. "I can't wait to see you tonight. It's been so long, and I need you more than ever." My stomach dropped, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. It felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. He was with her. He had found someone else. Someone younger, someone who wasn't me. She was everything I wasn't, everything I feared losing. The realization hit me like a wave, crashing into me with an intensity one wasn't prepared for. I felt sick, my body numb, my mind spinning. He had done it. He had betrayed me in the exact same way I had betrayed him. And the worst part? It wasn't just a physical affair. It was emotional too. He had been seeking something from her that I couldn't give him any more: attention, affection, maybe even validation. She was everything I couldn't be for him anymore. I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of the betrayal settle in my chest. Part of me wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there. But another part of me, the part that was still holding on to the fragile thread of hope, told me to wait. Maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe he had been seeking revenge just like I had. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. This was different. This wasn't a moment of weakness or anger. This was a choice. A choice he had made when he had every opportunity to walk away, to heal, to let go of the pain. But instead, he had chosen her. I felt my whole world crumble around me as I read the messages, as I realized how far apart we had drifted. The man I had once known, the man I had trusted with my heart, had found solace in someone else. I wasn't just losing him anymore, I was losing myself too. I wasn't sure how to feel in that moment. I was angry, devastated, heartbroken. But above all, I felt empty. I had pushed him away, yes, but this was something else. This was the ultimate betrayal. In a way, I couldn't help but feel that we had both been lost to each other long before either of us could admit it. And now, here we were, two people who had once shared everything, now sharing nothing but pain and distance. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know whether to confront him or just let him go. But the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. All I could do now was wait for him to come home, for him to face me, to admit the truth. I knew he would. But what would I do when he did? Would I be able to forgive him? Would I even want to? Or had we both lost the will to fight for something that was already dead? I had never felt so lost in my life. Each day I woke up, unsure of who I was anymore, unsure of where I was going, or what had happened to the woman I used to be. I had betrayed him, yes, but in that betrayal, I had lost more than just his trust. I had lost myself. The shame weighed on me like a constant burden, and every glance at him, every silence that stretched between us, made me feel smaller, more insignificant. He was distant, more than ever, and I didn't know if I was feeling the hurt more deeply because I had betrayed him, or because I was witnessing him slipping away from me, becoming someone else. I had always imagined that time would heal our wounds, that if we just gave it time, things would settle down, and we'd find our way back to each other. But now, I was beginning to realize that time wasn't going to fix anything. Time was only making it worse. We had both changed. We were no longer the people we were when we first fell in love. I didn't even recognize the woman in the mirror anymore. I had destroyed her, piece by piece, with every bad decision, with every lie I told. And now, I was watching him do the same thing to himself. The man he had been, the man I had fallen in love with, was fading. He had become bitter, angry, withdrawn. I saw it in the way he carried himself now. His shoulders were always hunched, his eyes always guarded. He had become someone I was afraid of, someone I didn't know how to reach. But I couldn't just give up. I couldn't let him go without trying to salvage something. I had to believe that there was still a chance. Maybe it wasn't about fixing the past. Maybe it was about fixing the now, about finding a way to rebuild what we had, even if it meant starting from scratch. But the more I tried to hold on to that hope, the more I realized it was slipping through my fingers. His walls were too high now. Every time I tried to reach out, I was met with resistance. He wasn't the man I had once known. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't want to be anymore. I started questioning everything. My choices, my actions, his. What had we become? How did we go from two people who couldn't live without each other to this? It was hard to look at him and not feel the weight of everything that had happened. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. I didn't know if I wanted him back. I didn't know if I was even capable of loving him the way I once had. The guilt consumed me, telling me that I had to make it right, that I had to fix the broken pieces of us. But a part of me was starting to wonder if we were too broken to fix. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much pain I was in, how much I regretted everything, how much I hated myself for what I had done. But the words wouldn't come. They never did. Instead, I sat there, silently, watching him, watching us drift further and further apart. In some ways, I think I was more afraid of losing him than I was of facing the consequences of my own actions. The thought of being alone, of not having him in my life, was something I couldn't bear. But in the same breath, I knew I had already lost him. He was slipping away from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I thought about the things we used to do together, how we would talk for hours, how we would laugh until our stomachs hurt, how we would just be in each other's presence, content. It all seemed like a dream now, a memory from another life. The man I had married was disappearing, and all that was left was the man who was angry, who was distant, who was seeking something outside of me to fill the emptiness inside. And I realized in that moment that it wasn't just him who was searching for something. I was too. I was searching for a way to make things right, searching for a way to undo the past. But I was beginning to understand that there was no going back. No amount of regret, no amount of apologies, no amount of time would ever change what had already happened. The damage was done. We were both lost in our own ways, both searching for something we couldn't find in each other anymore. And the hardest part was realizing that, in the end, we were both victims of our own choices. I had broken him. He had broken me. And now, we were two broken people, standing in the ruins of what we once had, unsure of how, or even if, we could ever rebuild it. The silence in the house had become unbearable. It wasn't just the physical silence, the absence of laughter, the lack of our usual conversations, but the deeper, more profound silence that came from knowing we were both living in a lie. A lie that had started with a single mistake and now seemed to be suffocating us both. I would wake up every morning, hoping to find some trace of the man I had once known, the man I thought I could never lose. But he was gone, and I was left with someone who was nothing like the person I had married. I didn't know who he was anymore. And in the end, I didn't know who I was either. I had lost myself in this mess of betrayal and regret, and every attempt to find a way back to him only made the distance between us grow wider. What had once been a relationship built on love, on shared dreams, on trust, was now a broken shell of what it used to be. I tried to cling to the memories, to the good times, to the person I had once been. But as I looked at him, I saw someone who had been so deeply hurt that there was no going back. I wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that I had caused this or the fact that I couldn't fix it. I wanted to hold him, to beg for forgiveness, to apologize for every mistake, for every choice that had led us to this point. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. The damage had been done, and no amount of words could heal the wound. I realized that maybe we were never meant to fix this. Maybe this was the end of the road. I wanted to believe that love could conquer everything, that we could overcome this pain and rebuild our lives together. But deep down, I knew that wasn't possible anymore. We had both changed too much. And in a strange way, I began to accept it. I began to accept that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the things we do can never be undone, and the damage we cause can never be fully healed. And so we stood there, two people, once so close, now so far apart, unable to find our way back to each other. The love we once had was still there, buried under layers of pain, of betrayal, of regret. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. And as I looked at him one last time, I knew that the only thing I could do now was let go. Let go of the past, of the hopes, of the dreams. Let go of the man I thought I could never lose, and of the woman I thought I could be. And as I walked away, I couldn't help but think about how we were both victims of our own choices. We had both lost. And now, all that was left was the aftermath. The hurt, the sorrow, the unspoken words. We were two strangers, standing in the wreckage of what we once had, unable to save each other. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go, to move forward, and to find a way to heal the broken pieces of ourselves. If you've made it this far, you know the weight of this story. I want you to think about what this journey has taught you, about how easily we can break and be broken. Please take a moment to subscribe to keep these stories alive. Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice matters. These stories need to be heard, and by commenting, you help keep the memory of those who suffered alive. This isn't just my story. It's a story that resonates with many, and we must not let their voices fade into silence. If you've felt something here, if you've connected with this pain, I invite you to watch more stories like this. You'll find them in the playlist, linked in the description or pinned in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's preserve these memories, because the pain, the love, and the lessons will live on as long as we keep sharing them.